So first of all, like Ronnie, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Absolutely. My name is Ronnie Williams. I am the new men's and women's sprint and hurdles coach at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky.
Nice. So I love the beer, by the way.
Oh yes, it's my new thing. Thank you.
So first of all, there's like a question I want to ask is about like the it's kind of like the core workout for sprinters. I saw on like the other coaches, they mentioned that it's kind of like dynamic core stability for sprinters. Can you explain to us like what exactly is like dynamic core stability?
So when you think in terms of dynamic core stability, right? You got to think in your posterior chain, your lower back, your hips, your abdominal cavity. These are all things that are going to be integral into and helping you maintain optimal sprint mechanics. This optimal front side mechanics where you see people knees up to the front, knees up to the front, covering ground. Another important component to that is sprinting is such an explosive event because you really force application, which is, you taking your foot and how hard your foot hits the track to project force. The stronger your hips and your core stability, your dynamic core stability is, you'll have less hip displacement. It's why so many sprinters will go to the chiropractor to have core stability, because when your hips are off, you tend to have one leg length longer than the other, and you can have a lot of hamstring injuries that way. So one of the things that we're always striving to is to make sure we keep our low back, abdominal cavities, and our hamstring intact, so that you try to minimize the ability for hip displacement, and then also just to keep the ability also to keep running posture, and also be able to keep your knees up so you can continually get to the front side, so you can have optimal stride length to go with stride frequency.
Nice. So can you like walk us through how like usually how would the core workout or the dynamic stability would be progressed?
Well, first and foremost, I think when you get athletes, depending on their training age, you got to figure out where they are in their core stability. So they're going to be at varying different levels. So you're going to have, for instance, you can have a component of it is hip flexibility. You got to have great hip flexibility, but then we also got to have great hip strength. So we'll do a lot of stuff like different types of walks, with a band, forward, side, diagonal backwards, diagonal across. In conjunction with that, doing things like hyperextension, reverse hyperextensions, doing anything, also doing planks, uh, sit-ups, hanging leg raises, V-ups, side crunches. There's a multitude of different exercises so that you're also doing stuff to work on your adductors, your internal, your external rotation and internal rotation, to work on your adductors as well, to make sure, because all of those are also all components of this, making sure you have dynamic core strength, and to make sure that your posterior chain is intact. So depending on the day and the activity with which we have going, sometimes it's incorporated in our warm up. Like say on a light day where may do hurdle mobility, med ball throws, and sometimes it may be comes in the ab training we do 3 weeks with 3 weeks and three times a week in the weight room, as well as adding some of those core things like reverse hyper extensions and of that nature to within our strength and conditioning, our strength program in the weight room.
Nice. So I want to like dive a little bit deeper into like the walking mentioned, like probably holding a band front side or like holding a bar. Um, how would you like program the walking or like from the basic? Is it holding a ball in front is the basic or like holding
So
yeah.
typically, what I do, I would have bands, right, and we'll give colors. Say yellow bands the lightest, say reds the medium, and blacks. Depending on where you are in your hip strength, and if we're all starting, we may all start with yellow. So we may do walk forward with the band. We'll walk down 15 meters, walk back. Then we may turn, and we may walk to the side, both ways and back. Then we may do kind of a step here, step in, step out, step in, step out. So we will have three varying different kind of movements. We'll do three different kind of varying movements to kind of to specifically work on hip strength. In conjunction with that, we're also going to do things like hurdle walkovers, hurdle walk unders. So we're going to kind of do a mixture of those things. And as you get stronger, we'll go from yellow band to red band to black band. And then once our core stability is strong, we're going to always have that, at least a component that will be one day a week in our training, so that we're trying to maintain that throughout the duration of the season.
Nice. So, besides like core stability, the other thing I want to ask is about like how would you program like resistance sprinting throughout the season?
Resistance sprinting can come many different forms. It can go from pulling a sled, to some people like to use bungees, running hills. Running hills, the intensity of pace is going to be the distance with which you're running on the hill. I think typically we'll start in general conditioning, where we'll start with hills. Then as we come out of general preparation, we'll go more to sleds. We'll go to varying different poundages on the sled. Maybe we'll start with a 25 for the women, 35 for the men. Maybe we'll end up with a 45 for the men, 35 for the women. A lot of people like to do towing, where you're pulling people or things of that nature. It can vary in so many different forms. I'm just not necessarily I'm not somebody has never been big on the bungee and pulling. Doesn't mean that it's not something that I may not implement in the future. It's just something that I haven't traditionally done a lot of. I've always been one to do more hills and or sleds, and sometimes I will do a little bit more resistance if we're doing block clearance, but not say over the straight true bungee in that way.
Nice. So, I know there's like a lot of like coaches would use like technology like 1080. Have you ever used a 1080 before?
I have not used a 1080, though. That's like the unicorn. If you're lucky enough to be in a place where you have a 1080, I think we'd all like to play with that and figure out how to fit that into our programming, but everybody doesn't have one because they're not exactly, they're a little bit more than $3. So I, so far in my career, have not used one. I think I would welcome the opportunity to figure out how to fit it into my programming and what I can do, because the people that I do know, or the colleagues that I do know that have them, speak very highly of what you can do with them.
Nice. So, besides like core stability and like resistance sprinting, the other thing I want to discuss is about like some coaches call it like acceleration ladder, or like cone drills, or like hurdle drills for acceleration or max velocity. What are your thoughts on like the acceleration ladder and how to set up for these like drills?
Well, you kind of gotta, as you think of it in terms of your acceleration ladder, some people call them cone drills, and so I look at typically I look at cone drills. I'm typically going to use cones. I'm going to mark the distance in which we're running. When I think of, if I'm doing acceleration drills, I'm probably going to have wickets, and those are the small hurdles, and I'm going to typically have them set at a certain stride length. Like if I know I got really talented, elite, capable sprinters, I may have the men's acceleration ladder with the wickets set at from the first step through, say, the first 26 steps, that say a 10 flat 100-meter stride length variance. And then I may have the women 11 flat. If I have athletes that are not at that level, then I'm going to have subsequent stride length ladders for them to go over the wickets at, say, if it's 11-3, say if it's 10-3, say if it's 10-5. If your hurdles, I'm going to have them at a certain distance. And so I have these written on a chart. I have a chart, and so I'll measure them and I'll have them out. So there'll be varying distances depending on my team, the level of my team, and the talent of my team. If it's a high school student, it's not going to be at the level of, say, an Olympic level athlete and our elite post-collegiate elite NCAA athlete, because an elite NCAA athlete, as we can tell by the latest world championships, is in potentially a world championship finalist if they still got a little juice in the tank after their NCAA season.
Can you like give us some of like the example about like how would you put up the control for like the elite athlete, and how would you put up the control, let's say the athlete like have like nearly like 11 or like nearly 12 seconds for a 100-meter sprint? What's the main?
Well, I think it's kind of like, kind of what you illustrated in your, like kind of in your question. Knowing your kids, what their personal bests are, knowing their training age, is kind of going to dictate what you put them on. And before we get to that phase, we would have went through our general preparation. So I've seen the kids move, I've seen them train. And so I understand what their technical efficiencies are, and more importantly, their technical deficiencies and their strengths and their weaknesses. And obviously the technical things, that the components that we are trying to work on. And so knowing that, I will kind of make a judgment as to which ladder I'm going to put them on, and where I'm going to start them. Because clearly, if somebody runs 12 flat, if it's a lady, you're not going to put them on an 11 flat training model, right? That's not going to get them to where they want to be. It's not saying that maybe this kid has that talent, but obviously training is progressive, over time. And so that part of it is going to be up to me to just make the evaluation of what I see and where they're at. And also understanding within that, I'm going to have an idea at that point what their strength levels are in the weight room. Have they ever lifted weights before? Have they not lifted weights? When you watch them run, how good are their running mechanics? Do they have good stride length? Do they have good front side mechanics? Do they have dorsiflexion on the backside of their stride length? Are their arms in the proper place? Do they have proper posture with their head and their upper body? So it's kind of a multifaceted analysis, and trying to figure in multifaceted analysis as you're watching kids move in their abilities over several different levels, even in their dynamic course ability, before I can even decide where I'm going to put them and where I'm going to start them. But I think in general, you're always going to start more cautious. It's easy for me to start you smaller and know that I can move you up to the next ladder and progress than to try to start you at the highest ladder and move down.
Cool. So in acceleration or like the block clearance, what exactly would you like, or what are some things you're gonna be looking at, or like some things you're gonna be cueing your athlete?
Initially, when I like, for me, it's going to be unique in that every athlete I'm taking is going to be new, because we never worked together before. So the first thing I'm going to have do is I'm going to have them set the block how they set it last year. Then I'm going to evaluate what they do. I'm going to look at their block setting. They're not going to look at them in the set position. And so I'm going to make the adjust, and from there I'm going to make the adjustment until I see if I like their block setting. Then if I feel like I need to adjust their set position, are they too low? Are they too high? Are they coming up in a set position and rocking back? Are they coming up just raising their hips and staying in the correct position? I'm going to evaluate all of those things. And then I'm going to see, how they clear the block. Are they going horizontal off the block, or are they going vertical? We know that the principle of acceleration are long to short, low to high, right? So we know we don't want to be vertical in nature off the block, but how are we clearing that? So I'm going to look at all of those factors, and as I see what they do and I'll make adjustments, I'm going to first fix their block position. Then I'm going to fix their block setting, and then I'm going to try to fix or get a commonality in how our first initial movement off the block to where our first step off the block is within a certain place. Because then I know if I get it there and I can keep you in the correct positions, then I know I can set up your acceleration over the first 30 meters of the race.
Cool. So for acceleration or like for the block clearance, I know some coaches cue like a toe drag. and there's some discussion about like the toe drag. What are your thoughts on this?
I am not a fan of the toe drag. I think by using some coaches are very big components of the toe drag. But my thing that I would answer is when you look at the Olympics or World Championships, how many athletes do you see using a toe drag? I think that by using a toe drag, it severely hampers your ability to exert force over your on your second step out of the on your second step off the block, and I think it also makes you go in a vertical capacity, so it doesn't keep you in a position where you can keep pushing horizontally. Again, long and short, low to high. So the second step is going to swing. You're going to go vertical, and you're going to go short. So if I've created all of this power in the weight room, now I'm now on my second step, clearing the block, I've now in turn I'm not automatically not using optimizing my power, which we know if we're running 100 meters, there's only so many, we want there's so many, we want our optimal ground contacts. So if it's 47 strides, we don't want to add one if we don't have to, or a half of one, because there's going to be a variance in the outcome at the end of a race. So some coaches have had tremendous success with that. And, I'm not one to want to talk negatively about them. I just know from what I see and what I believe out of a biomechanical nature. And as I think of elite sprinters and as I watch the commonalities of elite sprinting, I don't believe that is optimal. So that is something that I personally don't teach, and that I don't believe that I will teach.
Cool. So, the other thing I want to talk about is after the acceleration, it's about max velocity. So,
Yes.
still, what are the main thing you're gonna be looking at when you teach max velocity?
If we're talking about the technical demands of getting to max velocity, it's going to be number one, posture. Are we in the optimal upper body position? Is our head in the proper place? Is our upper body, are we not too far forward? Are we not too far back? Once we're there, okay, do we have good backside mechanics? Do we have a dorsiflexion of the toe? Are we bringing up? Are we stepping over through the calf and stepping over to the front side? And as we step over to the front side of our stride, are we landing underneath our center of mass? Not in front of us, not behind us, and we're not sticking that foot out so we get optimum force application. Because if we can stay in that position and we have optimal force application, then we know we're going to have optimal stride frequency as well. And so and then within that, where our arms are our arms high? Are they too low? Are we getting good arm swing? Because as we're trying to get optimal frequency with our legs, our arm frequency and our leg frequency must match. So are we doing the correct things, not only with our upper body, but with the arms, with the things with our legs? So it's really three different components you're trying to mirror in the optimal way.
Great. So, what let's say what happens if an athlete enter after their acceleration, they're gonna enter max velocity, but they kind of sit too low instead of having a tall posture and kind of floating.
Typically, if the first thing I'm gonna see, okay, if they're kind of sitting, what are they doing? What are they doing? Are they like this, chin down? Are they this and squatting? What are they doing to make them sit, right? So the first thing I'm going to check is I'm going to check to see if their upper posture, is their head in the right alignment? Is their upper body in the right alignment? The next thing I'm going to check, well, do we have dorsiflexion on the backside of their movement, right? Because if that leg if they're just swinging their leg through and not really getting their knees up and have dorsiflexion, then that could cause their hips to drop and then to kind of swing and kind of their foot placement is going to be out in front of them and not underneath their center of mass. So then that in turn will also cause them to squat. So it could be several different things, and it can vary between the athletes. And some of it could be maybe they're young in their career, and so they don't have good dynamic core stability. So they don't yet, because of their training age, have the ability to hold that position over say the course of 100 meters at maximum race intensity. And so those are things that we're actively going to be striving to improve.
Well, I know some of the coaches when it comes to like mass velocity, I know some of the coaches will like talk about like scissor motion or like switching the leg or like pre-tension when you hit the ground. Why like I noticed that you mentioned a lot of times about like dorsiflexion when the leg is in the backside or like yeah backside mechanic. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So why like you mentioned like sometimes on dorsiflexion on the backside mechanic instead of like scissor motion like pre-tension hitting the ground?
Well, the reason I say that because I know that from experience that if you have dorsiflexion, which if I take this right, if your foot's in the back, so when your foot is and your ankle's cocked like this, that is going to be your ankle dorsiflexed. If it's not dorsiflexed, your toe is going to be pointed down. Chances are, if your toe is pointed down, then that leg will swing through and you'll swing it up. But if you have the dorsiflexion like this on that back foot, then instead, if you're this, then your foot is going to come up like this. So if it comes up like this, now it's going to step over and you're going to put it down. I'm one to believe that if I can get you to be correct on the backside, then I'll automatically eliminate the ability of your leg, of you to swing your foreleg through to put it down. Because if you're dorsiflex, you're just not going to move that way on the backside. And so it makes it easier for you to feel this, to get in this position. Toe down here, and so then it's easier to step through and to step down. Bad illustration, but I'm just trying to give a visual explanation of kind of the movements, running mechanics. I'm one to believe that if I can fix that, then I can help you get the right feel of what it feels like to feel that, and then feel yourself have the right front side and strike underneath you. So then we start ingraining you replicating the feel. Because one thing about athletes never know what something looks like. Athletes can only replicate feel. So they got to trust my eyes and my cues to put them in the right positions so we can start to replicate that correct feel, right? We know that to replace one habit with another habit, we got to do it right 26 consecutive times over 26 consecutive days. So me, I'm a very big believer in every day just coaching these things, starting from the basic of A skip, B skip, high knees. If we're doing straight leg bounds, everything, I want the toe up, I want a dorsiflex, because that is an integral part of elite sprinting. And so I'm just a firm believer to teach that. And every coach sometimes have different cues for something, but in reality, we're all saying the same thing. We just say it in a little different way. And sometimes you may say it a little differently to that individual athlete because in their mind, you want to communicate it to them in a way that they understand it the best.
Cool. So when it comes to like drills, you're gonna be teaching them on like the dorsiflexion. Does that mean that when it comes to like A skip or like B skip, they're gonna land on their whole foot instead of like the forefoot?
If you dorsiflex, you should always if you're dorsiflex, you should always be on the forefoot. Right. So every drill we do, you'll hear me say 1,000 times, heel up, knee up, toe up, heel up, knee up, toe up. Because I want that ankle dorsiflex, I want that ankle cock. I want you to constantly be thinking about that to the point that when you start to sprint, it's the second nature. So I'm gonna constantly be given the same cues over and over. And then a lot of times I'll have the athlete repeat it back to me when I give them the instruction, because I want them to explain it back to me, because I want to see the manner in which they understand it. Because maybe in their mind, they may hear it a little differently. And so sometimes I'll cue them in the way they say it back to me if it helps them to retain it and be able to execute it better.
Nice. So next thing I want to ask is about like GPP and SPP for like sprint training. I know in college there's like indoor season and outdoor season. So how would you programming how would you program for like indoor season, and what's the difference between like off season, indoor season, and off season?
Well, off season it's a little bit different because when you come in, the kids are, let's say 99% of your team, their season is going to be over at the conference level, the NCAA first round of NCAA championships. Some will go to USA championships, but to make a team is pretty elite. So when you come in the fall, as you start to get ready for indoors, you're going to have to go through a general preparation period just to get them in condition and get them back according to lifting weights and, getting their strength levels back up, if not better, depending on what they've done in the summer. And so I got to work on just getting them in general condition. So, and then as I start to get them in general condition, start to add slowly introduce some sprinting, some not very intense acceleration work in there. So, and I'm going from essentially zero to building them up to get ready for indoors. And indoors is very different because in the indoors, it's a descending order list. So if you run a time, you're in the top 16. Okay, you're going to go to the NCAA championships. With that idea, we're going to be ready for the championship part of the season. Versus outdoors, it changes a little bit because you got to run the NCAA first round, and it's more of a qualifying to make it through to the end. So while we want to be running fast, we want to be running well, we have to absolutely be at our peak best at the end of the season because we have to really run our way through rounds into the championship meet versus, you could come out and run 6:52 the first meet. If you're a guy in the 60 and you're going to go to the meet, right? So then it's like, well, how am I going to maintain that? You of course got to make a decision. Versus outdoors, you got to be at your best at the end to get in. So it changes it. Versus indoors is really a 6-week kind of sprint. Versus outdoors, you just got to be great over the last 6 weeks because you really got to qualify your way into the meet, and it's incredibly elite to get there. So outdoors, you really kind of unload your training at the end to have your and put your endurance maintenance workouts in there to have your kids optimal so they can get through the last 6 weeks. Versus indoors, if you might be a little bit more aggressive so your kids can run faster probably by the middle of February, and then you're kind of just trying to maintain to get them to through the NCAA championships. Versus outdoors, you'll really kind of, I know we can qualify for the first round with a heavier training load, and we're going to really hold it all and really deload for the last 6 weeks for the season, plus USA championships or whatever your country's championships are.
Nice. So, when it comes to like in like let's say indoor season or like before the indoor season, what's the weekly layout gonna be like for like sprint sessions?
Typically our heaviest sprint session will be on the front end of the week because that's going to put it the furthest away from the meet possible. So our heavy squat session in the weight room, our squat session, and our sprint session is going to be Monday. And after a competition, it's going to probably be maybe a Tuesday. We're going to have that as far away from the meet as possible because we want as much recovery for the next competition as possible, knowing that they're coming off a Sunday day off and a Monday day of recovery, getting physio, getting those things. And so that will be that. And then that will be our acceleration day. And then depending on if we have a meet or not have a meet, it depends on if we're going to give where we are in the cycle. If that's the week where we schedule speed endurance, or maybe we have more of a maintenance conditioning, maintenance conditioning workout, depending where we are within the weeks of the training and how long it's been since we had our last kind of conditioning workout. It would depend on if it's more speed endurance and or more general conditioning to kind of maintain that. So you're always kind of working to maintenance the three systems.
Cool. So, let's say after the indoor season, we're gonna enter the outdoor season. So it's gonna mainly be like, the sprint's gonna be the main workout, right? So what do you do between the sprints?
Well, first, the one thing we'll do is we'll take a recovery. The kids are gonna get a recovery week. Then it's also different than that. We're gonna start to introduce the 4x100 really comes into play, right? So then we're gonna slowly introduce a little bit more, some more conditioning into it, because we understand that we got a long time to go and we got to be ready by the indoor and be ready by the end of the season. So we're going to introduce some conditioning in there, and then we're going to do then it will be speed endurance. It's all going to be placed on when's our first competition, when you're going to compete those athletes, if they're a national level athlete that were at the NCAA championships, because you also got to understand, if a kid doesn't go to the indoor national championships, they would have not probably had a track meet in almost 3.5, 4 weeks. So those kids are going to be in a whole different training phase than your national NCAA championship level athletes. And so those athletes are going to be in a little different place than those. So they might be doing a little bit more speed, a little bit more stuff at a little bit more intensity, versus a lot of times you'll kind of slowly ramp your NCAA level athletes up. And so they will open up later in the outdoor season. They might not open up to the end of March, April, to kind of give them time to have a little deload and kind of slowly build it back up to a point where, okay, let's start to get our feet wet and start to progress back into with understanding of, we have a very long outdoor season. So we would probably have a lot of rest and recovery in there. And then in between that, we will probably, have a sprint session, maybe just some easy recovery work, and then we probably have some endurance work in there, and then we will probably have a little bit of some speed endurance in there as well. So we will probably go back to, since they won't be competing, to trying to train in all three systems a little bit, since we're gonna go a time frame before they compete.
Well, so since we're talking about like the 60 and the 100, would you say there's a race plan for like 660 or like race plan for like 100 meter?
Absolutely. There's a race plan, because everybody's trying to figure out how to get their athletes from the initial movement out the blocks, through optimum acceleration, through optimal transition, to get to optimum max velocity, to hold max velocity. So there absolutely is a race plan.
So how would like how different, I mean, the 60 meter and the 100 is like, what's the difference between these two in terms of like race plan?
In theory, there shouldn't be. But the thing that you find is, typically athletes are more impatient because it's a 60. So athletes will tend to rush their transition or rush their acceleration phase, versus when it's the 100, they feel like they have more time. So they're more patient and how they go through it. So their max velocity will tend to be better because they're more patient. I tend to teach it the same way, because it should be the same. And if you teach it the same way, you're going to get the same output. You're going to get the same result.
Cool. So can you walk us through exactly like how many phases of the race plan is?
For me, it's going to be block setting, set position, block clearance, acceleration phase, transition, max velocity, and holding max velocity.
Holding max velocity for like 3 seconds?
From 60 to 100 meters.
Cool. Got it. So last one would be like, this one was from like Jeff Petersmeyer, and he was discussing about like we were discussing about like bounding for speed, or like bounding for jumps. And this is what he saw when, I think it in TCU, or like I can't remember, like he mentioned that he saw like Jamaican sprinters bound a lot. Basically they bound every single day. So what are your thoughts on like bounding for like increasing speed or like bounding for increasing jumps?
No, I think first, if you jump, it's going to, well, if you jump, obviously that's so much of what you do, especially if you do triple jump. With regard to sprinting, I think bounding is important. I don't bound every day, but there's also, are we talking about box jumps? Are we talking about straight leg bounds? Are we talking about speed bounds? There's so many different components to bounding, but in our training, we typically have there's a day in there where we will perform bounding, and we will have a certain number of ground contacts in every specific bounding exercise we do on that day, and that's also to help with your power, from standing long jumps to speed bounds, to straight leg bounds, to single leg hop, to double leg hop, to box jumps. It'll come to shape in many different forms over the phases of where we're at in the season. And I have several different bounding workouts that I have that we do in several different phases.
Nice. So would you do that like throughout the whole season? I mean, speed bound.
I would do it. We'll introduce it after about the first 6 weeks of the fall, and then there will become a component when we're in the middle of indoor season where we'll stop as we're peaking. Then we'll go back to introducing it outdoors, and then there'll become a point where maybe we put something into maintenance. Maybe it's not every week or 3 times a week, but we're going to do a little something to maintenance and keep that system and keep that component in our training to keep you sharp. So there'll always be little components of it, but it just comes in doses.
Cool. Got it. So that's kind of like that's kind of all the question I have for you today. So if there's like coaches are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
You can look me up. I mean, the easiest way to find me is to look me up on the University of Louisville track and field website. I should be up there now, and you'll see my email up there. And so if there's something they see that they're interested in, they can definitely send me an email and just reference that they saw us on the podcast, and then ask me their specific questions. And I'd be more than happy to communicate them and answer any questions that they may have. Because as coaches, we're all trying to get more knowledge to help our athletes. And so I always want to be one that I contribute to helping. If somebody sees something that I'm teaching them that they think they can add to their toolkit, I'm always more than happy to help.
Thanks.